Welcome back. Is the United States ready to bring Cuba in from the cold? Earlier in the week, President Barack Obama took small steps to indicate that change might be on the agenda. Joining me from Miami is Jose Azel, a senior research associate at the Institute for Cuban and Cuban American Studies at the University of Miami, and Ambassador Peter DeShazo, the director of the Americas program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Before we get back to our discussion, though, let's take a look at the results of our chatroom poll, where we asked, should the U.S. trade embargo against Cuba be eased with or without conditions? Well, 76% of you said it should be eased without conditions, and 24% of you said it should be eased with some sort of conditions. Let's get back to our discussion. Ambassador, the issue here, I guess, with the op-ed piece that President Obama wrote is, Cuba obviously is a key message in there, but it was a wider message to Latin America, and I wonder here whether or not it seems to be a willingness to engage even with some of those who've been antagonistic in the past to the U.S., such as Venezuela's Hugo Chavez.
Well, clearly the countries like Venezuela are going to put the Cuba issue on the table at Port of Spain. I don't think that it's going to end up being the overwhelming topic. There are plenty of other important issues that the countries are going to want to talk about, and I don't think that the hosts will want the summit to be a Cuba summit. I think there'll be a lot of focus on the economy, there's a lot of focus on security issues, energy security, other issues that are important to the countries in the region. But it'll be there. The other countries in the hemisphere all have normal relations with Cuba. The United States is the exception, and a change in U.S. position would be welcomed by those countries.
That's what I was wondering, whether or not it's certainly a message to those attending that America's taking a different position, that it's revised its policy.
I think it's a message that probably goes beyond even Cuba and the Western Hemisphere. But clearly it shows that the administration is open to further analysis, to dialogue, and that there are possibilities perhaps for cooperation with other countries in approaching Cuba.
We have Ahmed on the line from Pennsylvania. Ahmed, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I have a question. My question is, how do the guests think that Cuba has been able to maintain high levels of human quality indicators, such as life expectancy and child mortality rates, like comparable to the United States, even under the embargo? And do they think that lifting the embargo will actually change those very highly sustained human rights, human indicators?
Right. Actually, Dr. Azel, I wonder if you could tackle that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of points that I'd like to make. Cuba in 1958, prior to the revolution, had the second, by most metrics that we can look at, the second highest standard of living in the continent, right after the United States. So Cuba was really a highly developed country in the sense of Latin America, of course, back in 1958. Today, Cuba's GDP is at the level of Haiti. We're talking about a level of income of approximately $200 per year per person in terms of the GDP. With respect to the social indicators, mortality and the like, as an economist, I am very skeptical of Cuban statistics. The Cuban government has a tendency to indulge in mendacity quite frequently, and the on-ground observations really do not match what the published statistics are. So I would be somewhat skeptical of what we hear in terms of Cuban metrics.
Dr. Azel, also a question from our chatroom, live station chatroom taking place from Afghanistan, where Nazira is asking, why does America want to talk with Cuba now after all this time?
Well, I think it's a new administration, actually in both countries there is a window of opportunity here clearly. However, I think it's very important to note, and I hope that the ambassador will agree with me on this, that for the last 30 or 40 years in our continent, not necessarily throughout the world, but in our continent, the United States has had a very firm and consistent policy in favor of democracy, in defense of civil liberties and political rights. It would seem to me a mistake if we were to suddenly abandon that and make an exception for Cuba and somehow signal that Yes, we have been in favor of democracy for the rest of the continent, but somehow for Cuba, we're going to make an exception and not be as insistent.
Right.
So I'm hoping that as the debate goes forward and as there is some sort of a diplomatic engagement, that civil rights and political rights are at the top of the agenda.
Ambassador, how do you view that?
It was interesting to note that President Obama's op-ed phrased the return to Cuba in the context of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which is very important. The charter was signed by all countries in the all of the OAS member states on September 11th, 2001 in Lima. It basically reaffirms that representative democracy is the only legitimate form of government in the region. It's the government that all countries have the right to or have the responsibility to adhere to and to promote. And so it's not a question at all of abandoning U.S. position on democracy, but I think it's a view that perhaps there are other ways of approaching Cuba and U.S. relations with Cuba towards the goal of helping to promote a transition to democracy in Cuba, but taking a different tactic.
And I wonder, Ambassador, with engaging with the U.S. and President Obama engaging with other Latin American countries, how that might put pressure on those countries that have been antagonistic to the U.S. to consider changing their position, and again, maybe perhaps put pressure on Cuba to reform as well.
I'm not sure if a change in Cuba policy is going to make any difference in terms of U.S. relations with countries that may not have a very positive view of the United States.
I was thinking of it the other way around, maybe, that if the U.S. engages elsewhere in Latin America, it puts pressure on Cuba to try to look at, coming into the fold.
That's the strongest card that the United States has, and the right way to approach the region. That the best example that the United States can set is to work cooperatively with countries in the region, to reach out to the countries in the region, to resolve problems that are a mutual concern.
Dr. Ezell, we had an email that came in from North Carolina in the United States. If I may put this one to you, sir. It came from Eric Marshall Berger, as I say, in North Carolina. He says, like so many absolutes of the Cold War, the embargo has proven to be smoke and mirrors. The Cuban people don't hate us. They seem to take the whole thing with sadness that we cannot have a civil relationship, if not friendly. There are many people who would love to keep the embargo. All are seeking political power or economic gain or both. How do you regard the people in Cuba in terms of the way they might see the United States nowadays?
Well, we cannot engage in revisionistic history. If we look at the embargo as a tool that was designed to bring about political change or regime change, clearly it has not worked. But the embargo was imposed in 1961 by President Kennedy in retaliation for Cuba's expropriation of the properties of American citizens. The idea, of course, was to send a message to the Cuban government and to the international community that you cannot just simply take over the properties of American citizens without offering any sort of compensation. I believe that message was valid in 1961 and remains valid today. I suspect we all want our government to protect us and protect us from another government wanting to take our property. So from that point of view, the core message is still the same. And the second point I would make is that the disastrous state, the really deplorable state of Cuba's economy is not as a result of the embargo. Cuba can trade with every other nation in the world. The disastrous state of the Cuban economy flows from the failure of a centrally planned command economy system that simply does not work. We saw that in the former Soviet Union, and we're seeing it in Cuba as well.
I wonder, Ambassador, how, looking at the broader America's policy that President Obama has, how his star might be rising in this part of the world, having focused out east for the initial part of his first 100 days, so to speak.
The administration has paid a lot of attention to the region, an extraordinary amount of attention. We've seen that President Obama's first visit was to Canada, which is, of course, a key trading partner, but also a key member of the OAS. Secretary of State Clinton's visit to Mexico, the visit by the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, Vice President Biden's visit to Chile and to Costa Rica for consultations there before the summit, and now the President is in Mexico and then off to Port of Spain. This is an unprecedented amount of attention to the region in a very short period of time to start out the new administration.
Well, of course, we'll monitor what's happening in Lucianium and we'll be providing coverage. Ambassador, I want to thank you very much. Dr. Azell, thank you for joining us too.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for being with us. On the next show, we speak with the former president of Iran, Mohammad Khatami, about the prospect for better relations between his country and the West. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.